Okay, welcome everyone to this week's CodeX group meeting. We have a shorter meeting today, just one presentation. We have Roger Cohen, the CEO and co-founder, and Justin Acchiavati, the Chief Excel Officer of Capital Waterfall, who will talk to us about their approach to cap table scenario modeling. So it's just a kind of new kind of data model they have behind it, and we're sort of excited to learn about that. And before I turn it over to Roger and Justin, I will just remind you all that next week we have our CodeX Future Law Conference. It's been a long time in the making. It's, of course, our biggest event every year. And we hope you can all participate in person at Stanford, or if you can't come to Stanford, you can also you can enjoy the live cast we have from the conference. But this conference is, I think, will be better than any Future Law conference we had in the past. We have an amazing lineup of experts and topics, and it's sort of our, basically, what we as a group feel are the important topics that we want to bring to the fore, for our community, and so yeah, hopefully you can all join us. So with that, if any one of you has any other updates for the group, please use the chat function. And yeah, we'll be because we have just one presentation today. We'll go until about 2 o'clock today. So that will leave Roger and Justin about maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes for presentation, and then another 15 minutes for Q&A. Okay, well, with that, I will turn it over to Roger.
Thank you very much. So I'm delighted to be here. There we go, make myself bigger, share my screen, and start my show. Okay, can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. So my name is Roger Cohen. I've had the pleasure of being an attorney for 20 years, did about $10 billion worth of deals, both on Wall Street and in the Valley. And then I became an entrepreneur developing solutions to improve deal management. And I've recently teamed up with Justin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is Justin Acchiavati, and for the past 10 years or so, I run a company called Tilt Analytics, which specializes in building complex financial models.
Great. So today we're going to be discussing with you an important topic about how do you forecast the impact of a particular round of financing on your future liquidity event. As we all know, liquidity is challenging in the Valley right now. So our agenda, why we created Capital Waterfall, the challenges we're seeing, our solution, a very important point, fully diluted equals fully delusional, and we'll get into that in a minute. We'll give you a demo, we'll walk through our reports, and I'll be happy to answer questions. So let's get started. So why do we create Capital Waterfall? Doing deals, I discovered that the lawyers were in one vertical, the finance people in the other, and they seldom combined their expertise to produce reliable models that could accurately predict the outcome. That's a problem we wanted to solve and have. Secondly, better management of cap table data and documents. There's the Open Cap Table Coalition that's been recently founded with that mission, and they've said, hey guys, it's the responsibility of the company to maintain their information, and we're here to help solve that problem as well. And finally, we want to empower founders and executives to make informed decisions to get better outcomes. So that's why we did this. In the current situation, we've all seen Silicon Valley and challenges with financing. The result is a much less favorable market. Deal terms for companies are much worse. There's been a huge loss of founder wealth. And we think there's a need now for better insights into the impact of deal terms. So that's kind of where we are. So let's get to the challenge of how do you go about assessing the impact of your legal provisions in your deal documents on your future distributions, because that's where you make the money, not during the financings. So you have all these investment documents that I used to draft as a lawyer, 2 inches thick. Then we bury inside of all those documents all of these clauses that all have to be analyzed and put into a model before you can accurately predict what's going to happen. So we've solved that problem with our dynamic closing binders. Then in the middle here, you can see we have figured out how to pull the securities data out of CARTA or other locations. We configure the class features. We take the formulas out of the documents, and then Justin and I turn it into the code that is in the model that then generates accurate reports. So what we've done is just a kind of a glimpse under the cover. This is our dynamic closing binder. We get all the documents organized, validated, and then linked, so you can quickly and easily find whatever document you need to validate, and then we extract the relevant clauses, organize and tag them. So this key of getting the legal documents and data unified with the financial is a very important underpinning value that we deliver that differs from other solutions. So with that, let's get into fully diluted. Justin?
Yeah, it's common practice for founders and other security holders to believe that they will receive upon the sale of the company their percentage ownership in the company based on the fully diluted cap table. But relying on the fully diluted cap table in this way can be misguided. So for example, this report shows how the proceeds to 5 different security holder groups differs between each's fully diluted share of the proceeds and the amount they actually received. So blue means the group received more money than the fully diluted cap table would suggest. Red means they received less. And we see that the CEO received 26% less in actuality, founders lost 36%, and investors gained. And so how can we know this in advance? Our model, which we call the rational investor algorithm, can accurately forecast the actual outcome in contrast to fully diluted by factoring in accrued interest and dividends, conversion formulas, anti-dilution adjustments, vesting, net exercise calculations, and other provisions, all of which are buried in the legalese, but which we have unearthed and built into the model. At the heart of the capital waterfall model is a computational logic that is concurrently applies each security holder's legal provisions to maximize their share of consideration. The thing is, you can't know the results for any one security holder until you know the result for every security holder, and all are interdependent. So, and this is a massive challenge of circular logic. But our model simulates what happens at the closing table, with each party vying to maximize their share of the proceeds by applying their legal rights. So it unifies legal and financial analysis of the legal provisions to provide more accurate reports. And because this is complicated stuff, it becomes important, or all the more important, to show things step by step. One example of how we do this is the structure of our distribution waterfall reports, which show what all security classes were initially issued as, instead of reclassifying them based on where they end up in the waterfall. And this helps the viewer follow the bouncing ball. So, for example, the holders of Series A convertible notes can get paid out, or they can opt to give up their conversion amount to take the liquidity, or the liquidation preference rather, as preferred stock. And then as preferred stockholders, they can choose to forfeit their liquidation preference to receive their pro rata share of common stock if that's advantageous. So this simulates the behavior of investors exercising their legal rights to maximize their economic return.
Great. So let's kind of walk through an example of how that would be applied. Here's an M&A scenario. up at the top, we've assumed a range of values from 75 to 250. We've taken the money off the top for transaction and for debt, and now we're going to share the proceeds. So as what we see here, the conversion amount, you'll notice the Series B preferred at 75 million would get 22 million, but you notice all the zeros as the enterprise value goes up. Well, what's happening? They're just saying, hey, we're going to make more money as preferred. So let's drop the preferred, but voila, there are zeros there. So obviously our algorithm said, you know what, go all the way to common, take your pro rata share instead. So this is all happening behind the scenes in our scenario modeling engine in the cloud, which is generating all these reports. So Justin is now going to give you a demo of our client workbook so you can see how you would interact with the system and then apply the scenario modeling engine. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Justin.
so in case anyone's wondering what it's like to actually use our solution, we'll take a moment to look at that. So once the company's securities have been validated and loaded into the security modeling engine, from there, the user need only input some deal assumptions into their user workbook. Okay, so scrolling down, we see that initially the sheet is blank. There are no inputs, but the user can choose from which of a number of different deal structures is relevant. For example, M&A, down round financing, or say the decision on whether to sell the company now versus raise more financing, grow the company and sell at a later date. If I choose that, and then the next relevant button set is what kind of financing are we doing? And if I choose preferred stock, I can then tell the model that I want to see results not only at the security class level, but also for various key groups, key investor or shareholder groups. And so now scrolling below, I see that I have inputs that are pertinent to the selections made. We've got sell now, and the blue cells are the inputs for the valuation of the date, and then some information on the terms for our new financing, and then can select key groups that we want to have a look at. But once this is done, the user simply has to press the request analysis report button. All of the deal terms entered into the input sheet are preserved in the log, and the data in the log are transmitted to the cloud where the computations run.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So let's see the report. So what would have happened is within about 3 minutes, you would have received this report. And the first thing you'll note is that it has a date reported. And what that correlates back to is the data elements that Justin showed you. So you can always identify every data element that drove the model can be traced back with an audit history. You can also see what choices you made in the report you're receiving. And then a quick little snapshot of how many financings have been done in the past, where we are today, and the projected future transactions. From there, we produce a report where we're showing side-by-side analyses, sell the company, no new financing, or finance number one. And over there, all the variables that are there are what we populated. And now we're going to see a traditional fully diluted cap table before and after the financing. So you'll notice the new financing got 12.68% and everyone else was diluted. So from there, we now shift to our normal our model, and we say, hey, first of all, let's measure the variances. We raised 20 million in cash, but we get 60 million in value in 671 days. So this sets the parameters of our choices. And then we can look at 3 classes: the common, the series 1 convertible notes, and the options. And you can see here on the far right, the differences of how much more they would get by raising capital on those terms and selling in the future. But let's drill down a bit and see what the variance is caused by. So here, the 615 days of accrued interest is showing up, and that's what accounts for the increased value for the convertible notes. The options during that same period had a huge vesting increase, which is what drove their value. Whereas the common stock, they had no legal mechanisms to enhance their return, and so they get a smaller, much smaller increase. So now let's take a look at another way in which, again, the same parameters, same deal, but now we're sorting by class, but with a different visual presentation, because this is sometimes easier for folks to absorb in this format, or we can have the same report sliced by group. So there's a lot of functionality. We don't have time to show you all of these reports, but we've developed reports that can show you the exact data elements that have been input into the model. We can do lots of reports about capital raising, M&A deals, executive compensation, including option repricing, which is unfortunately going to be happening a bit. We can do a complete walkthrough of every term of a security, whether it's an option, a warrant, or preferred, to explain to investors how it works. If you need stakeholder approval, we have reports that show their IRR and exactly how much they're getting and so forth. We have all sorts of securities intelligence where we turn the data into actionable images. And then we've got the ability to validate and send your lawyers all sorts of information. And finally, we can expose calculations that may be necessary in order to validate what's in our reports. So to sum it up, it's a solution for the entire capital life cycle because we produce accurate, insightful reports for every phase of every deal. We've shown you the deal types that we cover, and we have all these different phases of a deal that we can assist on. So that's our overview. Happy to take on your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Roger and Justin. This is really fascinating. I think what for me really stands out is that you're basically turning all these kind of concepts that, you know, many entrepreneurs don't really know what the impact is on the bottom line into specific numbers. And that's really cool because you negotiate and you don't know what it means, what are the implications down the road, and you have other priority, you just want to race the round. And so usually as an entrepreneur, you don't have as much expertise as the VCs have in understanding what the impact is on the bottom line versus, you know, if you get a discount or, you know, whatever the terms are that you listed. So I think that's really powerful. And so I'm wondering, I mean, you can probably serve all the different stakeholders in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, from entrepreneurs to the VCs to the lawyers. But my first question is, you know, where do you see yourself? You know, what's your primary target user base? And then where do you come in? Is it like, I mean, do you see this? What's the initial use case? Is this like you're preparing for, you know, if it's for the entrepreneur, you're preparing for the next round of financing, and you've got a term sheet, and now you want to understand the term sheet better and the impact on the bottom line, or like this example you gave, you know, raise, you know, sell now versus raise to grow more. I think that's a good example. But what are some of the other examples where you come in and help people get some more tangible insights?
Sure. So Roland, what I would say is the key triggering event is typically a term sheet. That's when people get serious.
Okay.
And while we don't have time to show it today, we have developed a term sheet sensitivity analysis. So while you're literally at the negotiating table, you can determine whether and how to, what impact all of these different terms would have. So here's a sensitivity analysis based on, do I negotiate the interest rate? Do I negotiate the discount factor? Do I negotiate the conversion cap? And so this is a new report Justin just created that basically at the term sheet stage, you can identify the exact impact of, you know what, if I agree to that term, it could cost me $2 million. I'm not going to agree to that, right? As opposed to I can give over here on this point and it really has no economic cost for me. So that's the first stage at which we, get involved. And in terms of, who is our client? It's very fascinating. It's like the tragedy of the commons, right? Everybody wants it, but, I'm not going to be responsible for it. So investment bankers love it. Lawyers say, gosh, this would be really helpful, but, I have my own way of doing things. So we found that the C-suite really are the ones that are underrepresented. And this tool is fantastic to allow them to do the scenarios. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, you're working for 5, 6, 7 years, really hard and long, all for that exit strategy. And if you're relying on fully diluted, you're going to be disillusioned when all the legalese is applied and what you thought was yours is gone. So we think that that's the primary beneficiary of this.
Got it. And since part of it is prediction, I mean, there's a sort of a predictive model behind it, but what are the data you use for your algorithm to make those predictions? Do you have like deal outcome data, or how can you make a prediction for how a specific legal term will ultimately affect the bottom line?
Yeah, Roland, thanks for that. It's actually not a predictive model in the sense of the term predictive analytics, in the sense that we're not using a sample set of historical data, doing some kind of regression and then projecting onto a potential new set of inputs. This actually is the outcome is actually very deterministic in terms of the subjectivity comes in the estimate of the future value of the company. But of course, the CEO would be the person probably best placed to have a grasp on that figure or what that might be. And furthermore, even if there's uncertainty, we run scenarios evaluating a range of possible future valuations. But once the valuation is known, the legal provisions are what they are in the documents.
I see. Okay.
And so then the trick of it, though, is the interaction of everybody trying to exercise their rights, because if one security holder or one security class moves in a certain way, it changes the calculus for everybody else, right? Because there's only so much money available for distribution from the sale of the company, and it filters down through convertible notes, preferred stock into common, all of that after whatever's off the top. And so, yeah, go ahead, Roger.
No problem. So the point of the matter is, Roland, we are doing something that others aren't, which is the hard process of actually pulling the formulas out of the legalese and putting them into the model. So it's about the accuracy, and it costs a fortune to get lawyers to do this, so nobody does. That's why they rely on fully diluted. We've trained we use some AI, and we use a team of legal kind of engineers in India at a very low billing rate that I've trained to go in and transform the massive volumes of investment documents into structured data.
Cool.
We extract all the key terms, we link them, we organize them, and then Justin has worked to create an accurate code base that matches a standard conversion feature.
Yeah, that's sort of I think is a good segue to Marianne's question. First, she says, "Well, awesome work. Are there any plans to expand internationally? Australia needs you." Of course, Marianne's a professor and an affiliated faculty with CodeX in Sydney. And her other question is, whether you have experimented with ChatGPT. It could help stakeholders discover unknowns and using your sensitivity analysis, for example, generating the what-if scenarios. And just if I might add to that, also, I think in that process you just described, turning unstructured data to structured data, I think GPT could actually be helpful.
Well, let me tell you a story about that quickly. had a few years ago, I had bank executives, CEOs, lawyers, and auditors on one side of the room and technologists on the other. The technologist said, watch this machine learning figure everything out by itself. And the lawyers, the auditors, and the CEO said, where's the audit trail? How is that decision made? And the technology said, we don't know. The technology did it by itself. So this is not a good instance of uncontrolled AI thinking for itself. Everything we do, I used to write legal opinions for $100 million deals. You got to have everything organized so that the lawyers feel 100% confident that they can literally trace back every bit of work to the source document. Otherwise, capital will not flow based on what a chat engine told you was the answer. That's my honest opinion.
I see. Well, I think, but there will be probably in the future, in other use cases too, ways for ChatGPT to identify how a specific conclusion was reached. Or
here's where I think we'll see AI. It'll be in the extraction and classification of the clauses. And as long as I can have an audit history to trace the extracted clauses back to the source document, that's fine. And whatever I can do to use automation, I will to increase that.
That makes sense. Yeah. Oh, okay. So Bruce has had his hand up for a little while. Bruce. Bruce, you still there?
I'm unmuted, but I am also unseen. This is great work. I can't start the video. I'm a former Weil Gotshal lawyer, so I know from whence you talk about the complexity of these documents and the side letters and the contravening of defined terms that defy their natural meaning once they're in the hands of lawyers. So I had a thought, and we get paid a lot of money to do that. I had a thought. The government, particularly the DoD, is becoming more and more dual use technology focused. And as the FDIC's $500 million profit on SVB can show, which they made by supporting the purchase of the entity, the government may in the future be holding lots of equity stakes that it has no idea and no training and no tradition for how to exercise or even just keep track. And so they'll be ignored or will be sold in bulk. And I just wonder, as an adjunct to the company that you have, whether there's a merchant banking company that would just take all that stuff off the government's hands, or at least be the quote managing partner of a LLC for them to exercise them appropriately. Have you thought about the changing of our system of governments from we never want to hold equity in the private sector to we're going to end up holding equity in the private sector?
What I would say is our tool would be very helpful to identify when decisions need to be made about what additional capital to deploy, how long to hold the asset, what's going to be happening. So yes, I could see the value of us helping whoever has a large portfolio of investments in complex venture-backed companies better navigate that process to maximize their return. Absolutely. I'd be happy to carry on this conversation offline, and if you've got some ideas,
that's one aspect. The second is, I don't know if it's as much a feature of the documents for startup financing, but clearly there are critical technologies that have readiness levels, and this goes back to some research that I think I've shared with the group, Roland, in collaboration with Air Force Research Lab on readiness levels. But it would seem that the decision points that your software is trying to optimize for relate to readiness levels of the technology. Is it ready as a technology? Can it be manufactured? Is there a business model, and so on? And we could have a longer conversation about that. But well, just like you were saying before, Roger, the technologists and the lawyers don't talk to each other. The readiness levels of technology and the budgeteers for it don't really talk to each other in a way that is anticipatory of whether you're going to get to a TRL, a technology readiness level of, say, 9, and have a business model of 2, which historically will never work. So anyway, if you want, we can chat about that in terms of critical technology optimization.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, Bruce, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, so what's the business model? Do people pay per report, or how does this work typically?
There's an implementation fee where we charge them to configure their own model with their data, and then there is a subscription fee on a monthly basis to use the tool. So implementation and then subscription.
Got it. Okay.
And
awesome.
What we find is that our users typically, because of the way we've structured and why Justin is our chief Excel officer, is this is not all a code base. We figured out how to run Excel in the cloud and connect it to our workbook. So we are able to produce customized reports and solve problems in deal time. There'd be nothing more frustrating than trying to say to Carta does great work, but Carta, we need you to move this issue to the top of your production line so we can get our deal closed. That doesn't happen. Whereas with us, because we've used Excel in the cloud, we're able to quickly configure and develop an alternative report that gives the executives the insight they need to make the decision.
Got it. Cool. Well, it makes a lot of sense, and I think this was a great introduction to your approach, and I think for many folks in the community who are entrepreneurs, this will really ring true, and everyone's probably going to be kind of worried now about what kind of landmines are buried in the documents when everyone's generally thinking about the fully diluted number. Anyway, so yeah, I really appreciate you, Roger, and Justin for sharing. This is a really cool idea. We're already a little bit over the time today, so I think we should wrap it up here, but it doesn't seem like there are any more questions anyways, but if there are, if you could share like a good contact information in the chat, that'd be great, so folks can reach out to you directly. And yeah, I know several entrepreneurs, I think, who will be very curious to take your model for a spin. But anyway, so thank you so much for coming in today. Thank you everyone else for joining, and I'll see many of you next week at Future Law or otherwise at our next group meeting. So thank you all, and see you soon.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Thank you, everyone.